Tanshi, bonjour, and good morning. So as mentioned earlier, my name is Carly Teillet, and is the custom of my people, I'm going to start by situating myself. So I am the great-granddaughter of Sarah Riel. She is the daughter of Joseph Riel, and Joseph is Louis Riel's brother. I am Métis from the Red River community and was born there, and have been a visitor on these lands for about 12 years. I had the honor over the last year and a half to not work for the National Inquiry, but to work for two incredibly wonderful groups of Indigenous women. So the Vancouver Sex Workers' Rights Collective. So this is a collective of Indigenous women and gender-diverse folks and people of diverse sexual orientations who provide sexual services in Vancouver's downtown east side and are supported by the Wish Drop-In Centre, PACE, Sex Workers United Against Violence, and Pivot, as well as the Liard Aboriginal Women's Society. And this is a group of incredibly strong Kaska women in northern BC and southern Yukon. And these are the two groups whose voices and whose participation I attempted to bring forward through the National Inquiry process of the last year and a half, through which the parties withstanding were invited to participate. So what we're talking about today in this section is directly about violence. I'm not going to be sharing stories of violence, but I'm going to urge you to take a moment and protect yourself if you need to. And I won't be offended if part of that protecting yourself is taking a moment to step outside to breathe, because the stories that are in this inquiry report and the stories of the survivors and the family members, the reasons why we need to take up the calls for justice and ask the really difficult questions, they're difficult. And they're so important to know and to hear. So what are parties withstanding? Parties withstanding are groups that the National Inquiry recognized have specific expertise in certain areas. And they're also groups or organizations or collectives that the National Inquiry recognized would be directly impacted by the work that the inquiry was doing. So the National Inquiry released their report in June of this year. These two books is the first volume. There are supplemental reports, specifically concerning the province of Quebec, as well as what they're making an argument for the act of genocide. So, the National Inquiry, I'm hoping everyone has been as involved and following it as much as I have, but I mean, people are busy, and it's been my work and my life for the past several years. And what's really important to talk about is we are now not in a post-inquiry phase. We are not ready to move forward. The inquiry was not the beginning. Families, survivors of violence, communities have been arguing for people to address the violence, the disappearance of Indigenous women and girls, gender-diverse folks, for decades. Women went missing and were found while the inquiry was happening, and still now that it's finished. Grassroots organizations pushed for this to be examined, and they are still doing that important work. We are not in a post-inquiry stage. So just really important that we think about that this work started long before and is going to continue long after, and it's incredibly important to do so. The National Inquiry held 15 community hearings where they gathered together people of community to help tell their stories. There was also statement gathering that occurred, and that was across the country. And there were 9 knowledge keeper or expert institutional knowledge keeper hearings. So what these looked like is they were people that the inquiry decided were experts. So that could be an elder, that could be someone who runs a shelter, that could be a professor or a lawyer, or Dr. Cindy Blackstock, Dr. Mary-Ellen Turpel-Lafond, or the amazing Ellen Gabriel. Some of the folks. Those are some of the women that we sang the Warrior song to during the inquiry for the incredible work they do. So at these Knowledge Keeper hearings, witnesses put forward thousands of pages of documents. They testified, and that evidence, in theory, was tested by some of the parties withstanding through cross-examination. The hearings, the expert hearings, are all available online. You can go and watch them if you want. The reports are available all online, as are the calls for justice. So telling the story of the inquiry is incredibly complicated. It's complicated because for me, as an Indigenous woman, as a family member of someone who's no longer here, I sat with clients in community and I listened to their stories of devastating loss, of personal experiences of extreme violence, anger, frustration, resilience, hope, determination. There's no one story of the National Inquiry, and there's no one experience of a family member that's lost someone. It was incredibly humbling to be trusted with those truths, and it was a huge responsibility to take that forward into the stage of the National Inquiry and try and make a large institution listen to individual pieces, individual stories, to try and get across that individual people's lives mattered and the particularities of what happened to them. So the National Inquiry divided people. Some people were included, some people were excluded and silenced. Part of that was the process. So Chief Commissioner Buller at one of the hearings told us that she and her team had identified over 100 causes and impacts of colonization. You can't examine that in 2 years. You can't unpack every reason why Indigenous women are targeted and why the state doesn't solve it in a 2-year period and hear the truths of all the people. So there were choices that were made about where they would go and who they would talk to so that they could get the work done. One of my clients was invited to share the story of her sister. And it was the first time that her and her family members had gotten together and actually talked about this. She found the experience incredibly healing. She received wonderful care from the health support during the inquiry and was welcomed into the team and was part of the process going forward. Some of my clients gave their stories and never received aftercare, never got follow-up. And some of my clients, particularly those who live under assumed names and won't tell anyone where they live, and that's what keeps them alive, couldn't go to statement gathering events because there was press there. Because if somebody saw them going to tell the truth of what they experienced, their life was at risk. So they were excluded through some of the mechanisms through which the inquiry operated. I sat with commissioners around tables and urged them. Every time I stood up, I said, you need to hear the voices of these people. We have space, we have elders, we have healers. Come hear the voices of some of the most vulnerable and marginalized folks. And it never happened, save for one informal meeting. Those truths are not part of this book. So as we go forward and talk about how important this work was and how many truths are in there and need to be respected, we also really need to be mindful that this process wasn't accessible to everybody and some people were excluded. So it's not definitive. This isn't the only version of what's happened to Indigenous women over the last 150 years. No way it could be. So some of the other pieces I wanted to touch on was procedurally. So as we're thinking about how to engage. So as counsel, we were given documents. So there's a panel of expert witnesses. 3 to 5 people are going up tomorrow morning. They're going to be on a panel. They're going to be giving their evidence. Each person has dozens of documents, hundreds of pages that are being put into evidence. Sometimes we didn't get those until 7, 8 o'clock the night before. Sometimes midnight, sometimes not till they were in the middle of talking did we get copies of those documents. How can we test that evidence? How can we challenge the narrative of the chief superintendent of the RCMP or someone running a human trafficking network investigation unit if we don't have all the material, if I don't even have time to read it all before they give their evidence? How can the expertise of my clients, Indigenous women, survivors, family members, people who run organizations and take things back to rebuilding relationships and keeping people safe, how can I make their expertise make the inquiry better if I can't read all the evidence before it goes in? The next piece is we were given 3.5 minutes sometimes to ask our questions of 5 people. Not 3.5 minutes per person, 3.5 minutes for the whole group. So, as you may have noticed when I started talking, it could take me 3.5 minutes to just tell you who I am as per my laws. That wasn't an Indigenous process, 3.5 minutes. 3.5 minutes is not even enough if I take off my hat, which I never can do because it's part of me, and I just go in as a lawyer and I'm going to ask all the questions I need to ask. 3.5 minutes is not enough. So was the evidence tested as fully as it could have been? The answer is no. Is it still important? Yes. Financially, to be able to travel to the hearings, to have my clients with me. You had to pay everything up front, tens of thousands of dollars. Clients couldn't attend. People who don't have childcare, people who are inadequately housed or are not housed, can't get on planes and fly somewhere and pay that out of pocket. It was inaccessible for a lot of our community members to go there. A lot of my clients said to me, you know, Carly, I don't have the privilege you have of having a phone and sitting at a desk. I can't answer your questions at a drop of a hat. So how was I supposed to get that knowledge from those experts to be able to put that forward? And when my clients did come, I had the honor of sitting at a table with 6 Kaska elders, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and we were at the child protection hearing, and we had 15 minutes on a break. Can you imagine asking one elder, never mind 6, to tell you everything you need to know about child protection so you can go up and cross-examine for 6 minutes in 15 minutes? Oh my. In that moment, I was disrespecting Indigenous knowledge transfer. I was disrespecting the way that they need to teach me to be their voice, to be their spokesperson in that process. Questions were asked. There were some great answers, but also there were some problems. So as we think about engaging with the calls for justice, as we think about engaging with this report, I just want to urge you as you go through to think about what are some of the voices that aren't here? Are there voices from my community that are missing? What are some of the other documents or evidence or reports or things that I know from the people that I work with that could have really made this better? And so let's talk a little about the call for justice in the last couple of minutes here. There's 231 calls for justice. Okay? And the calls for justice, I'm not going to quote any single one to you because we need transformative change to stop what's happening to Indigenous women in this country. No one call for justice, no one action of the TRC, no one recommendation from the Opal inquiry is going to fix it. We need widespread change. And the inquiry acknowledges this because they ask us to think about all the different pathways. So when you're thinking about the calls for justice, they ask us to think about 4 things. What are the historical and multi-generational, the intergenerational traumas that are at play here? What kind of social and economic marginalization is happening? How are we maintaining the status quo and accepting institutional lack of will to get things done? And are we ignoring the agency and the expertise of Indigenous women and LGBTQIA folks as we do this? So they ask us to think about substantive equality and human and Indigenous rights. They ask us to take a decolonizing approach to include families and survivors as we move forward, to recognize that Indigenous people have self-determination and that they, Indigenous people and community members and organizations, have a lot of the answers, as do the service providers, and we need to be at the table with these folks. A lot of these folks are in the room. You know what's happening in your communities where you're working. You know the stories of the people. We need to recognize distinction. No one call for justice can be applied to every single community in the same way. No one solution for a trans person is going to be the same for a two-spirited person, or if that person is Cree or Haida or Métis or Nanook. They have to be distinct. They have to be specific to the community. And they ask us to think about cultural safety, that we're not doing more harm as we're trying to move forward. And to be trauma-informed, so to be aware that we might be doing more harm and that harm has already existed through the operation of many systems, historic and present. So they call on governments to act. They call on industries and institutions, on service providers, on attorneys and law societies, educators, social workers and child welfare workers, the extractive industries, corrections, health and wellness services, police, transportation service providers, and they call on all Canadians to take up the calls for justice. And if you're looking for somewhere to start, I suggest, well, this is 1,200 pages. The executive summary is shorter, but not that short. But if you're looking for somewhere to start with the executive summary, start with the calls for justice for all Canadians, because in those places, we can do that. Every single one of us can do those in every single things we do. And some of those calls for justice are about calling out racism and sexism and the operation of power that enforces those distinctions within everything that we do. And we can take that up and we can move forward. There's all sorts of initiatives that are happening now, and I hope that as you go forward, you'll start asking questions. Some of the initiatives are being claimed as organizations. Well, we've answered this one call. This, like how Indigenous folks have been talking about treaties for generations, is not something you can just check the box and move on. This needs to be a new way of doing things. There need to be new relationships, and we need to start dismantling some of the systems that are causing violence and harm in our society and community, and that's not one action, and it's not one checkbox and move on. So if you see those news stories or your organization is asking about how you can take this up, do start those conversations and talk to the people in your community. Don't just impose a solution. Get them involved, take up what the community needs. Try and see if you can keep in mind all the folks who might need to be at the table to make these decisions. And walk softly. Thank you.